Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Sprinklebeard, and today we are going to evaluate the epic, and we are doing the Piercer Theowin. Alright, so in this game, we have this rock, paper, scissors mechanic going on, right? So we have our main damage. They kind of just deal your fighters and your defenders. They're just going to kind of do their standard damage to whatever they're able to hit. We have our mages, which are better against our heavily armored characters. And now we have our piercers, which are meant to damage our flying enemies. So we are going to review Theowin. Now, Theowin is kind of cool because he is a guaranteed epic that we can get on the account. We can go into fusion, so I guess let's show that off first. We can go into our summons, and we can go down to hero fusion, and we actually have the ability that we can fuse him. And what's nice is these materials are pretty easy to get. Glenn seems to be the hardest from me talking with newer players, as well as my own accounts. Both have struggled to get a Glenn on them until I've been able to just farm nonstop for experience. So I'm by no means encouraging people to rush this champion, but by all means, you can fuse a copy of him, which basically means he is guaranteed on the account. He's very good at his job, so we're going to get into that detail here in a moment. One of the biggest things I want to stress is that in this video, we are going to be talking about giving a whole bunch of resources to the champion. So like as you fully dust them up, as you fully awaken them. Because Theowin is a champion that we can fuse, I would heavily encourage no player to use awakening stones on him. The reason behind this is that we can just fuse extra copies of him, or as we are just pulling shards on the regular, we might get a copy of him. With that being said, I would heavily encourage majority of players, do not use your awakening stones. They are a rare and generic material. Generic meaning you can use them on any other epic. With that being said, since we can just fuse copies of him, and I just did this on my main account, I was able to fuse 2 copies of him to take him from 3 awakening to 5 awakening, and I love what that has done for the account. However, it did not feel nearly as good as 6-starring something on the account. So understand, you can fuse extra copies of him, or like let's say he's one of your favorite epics in the game. That is a roadmap for you. Yes, you could, like if you got these champions, you can just start making copies of them, start prepping them to this point, and then you can fuse extra copies of him and have loads of fun. With that being said, let's jump into it. So Theowin, you are a piercer character, and specifically if we look at his range, it does increase as we promote him. He is supposed to be an AoE attacker. In my opinion, that's kind of a consequential thing of his damage kit. He is definitely more of a single target attacker, and he can slow down that enemy and everything around that one enemy. So understand, it does say AoE attacker. However, I depend mostly on his slow, I don't think of him as an AoE attacker. In terms of damage, so in the last episode we were looking at who had a 3600. I want to show off that his damage is a 2941. If we compare this to other piercers, I'm just going to do 1 or 2 here real quick. But he is right on the money at that 2900. So Endril here is at base 2999, and then if we look at Tazira, 2941. So he's right in the middle of the damage dealers, which is actually quite impressive because his kit has a slow in it, which I mentioned briefly earlier. This means that as he's attacking and outputting damage that is considerable to like any other piercer, he also has the utility of a massive slow in his kit, which we'll review here in a second. One of the biggest shining things about a lot of the marksmen, their cost is much lower on average. So being able to summon him out early, as well as his ability to slow things down, makes him absolutely an amazing champion. And then when we get down here to the attack interval, we talked about this in the Wrath video, that a common attack is a 2.6. So him being at a 2.0 means he actually has some of the fastest And I can't think of somebody who attacks faster than him on like as base. He might be the fastest attacking champion in the game. This also means we do want attack speed on him, and we're going to get into that in his kit. Understand though that your return on investment is going to feel less because his base attack speed is so fast. It scales heavily. So the slower a champion is and the more attack speed we give them, their attack will be much noticeably faster. Because he's already at such a low attack speed, it's not going to feel like it's as impactful on him. However, as we read his kit, we're going to see attack speed is extremely valuable on him. What's super amazing about him, and I can't stress this enough, because he's already at a 2.0, getting him down to a 1 attack per second is going to be easier to do than pretty much any other champion in the game. And he has a big reward for getting him down to that 1 attack per second, which is going to make him a lot of fun. With that being said, let's get into what his kit actually does. So deals 100% damage to one enemy. After attacking multiple times, so he attacks 3 times, it's the 4th time that he attacks, he'll hurl a large saber that prioritizes airborne units. So it deals AoE damage upon hitting the targets. So he is a single target, he throws a blade out, and it will hit the enemy. Then he switches to his other hand, hits the enemy, throws another one, hits the enemy. Then he combines his 2 blades together into this giant saw blade. What I'm upset about with Theowin, this is a slight thing where I'm like, ooh, I really wish they had done this, but they didn't. When he throws out that giant spinning AoE, it only hits the target a singular time. It looks like it sits there and sits on their face doing tons of damage. It unfortunately does not. That's him actually attacking again while his blade stays out, the large saber stays out for like 2 to 3 seconds. He's already attacking again by that point. So the bad news is that his AoE is extremely limited. However, I do want to say how cool this basic attack is, and it synergizes super well with his ultimate, which we'll go over here in a second. Next is his passive Hamstring. If Blade Hurl and Large Saber are triggered when casting Hamstring, inflict slow on the surrounding enemies. So what this means is that if you when he throws out his passive or his ultimate, he will then slow the enemies instead of just attacking and hitting AoE damage. So Blade Hurl throws a spinning blade that deals damage equal to 100% of the attack, and this will scale up to 115% of the attack. The blade stays in place and deals AoE damage equal to 85% of the hero's attack per second to surrounding enemies for 10 seconds. So when we throw out his ultimate, that specifically will act like that saw blade effect that I was talking about earlier. The reason that I differentiate the two of these is that, number one, when I first started playing the game, I thought that they were the same. I was like, wait a second, his ultimate is just his passive, but I get to command when he summons it? Yes, but his ultimate also sits in place for a bit longer and deals that AoE damage over time, which feels amazing. Let's look at his awakenings next. Increases the slow effect of the large saber to 75% when casting the Hamstring. So this feels absolutely amazing. So originally the slow is a minus 50%, but when we awaken him, it gets up to 75. That 75% is so massive. I can't express how slow an enemy walks at 75%, minus 75% movement speed. It is delightful watching the enemy just slowly walk and just take tons of damage. Awakening 2, he gets an extra 200 attack. Again, with his main attack stat at 6-star, fully promoted, that being like 3,000, I think it was. It was like 2,900 and change. Him getting 200 would be 1/15th, so a 6% increase to his damage. The reason that this flat 200 is actually pretty good is that not only is it like that 6% increase, so it would be better than a flat 5% attack damage boost, but if you were to awaken him early, so let's say you did choose to fuse multiple copies, like you start playing this game, you love him, and you start fusing multiple copies of him, this plus 200 attack benefits him a lot more as you're leveling him up compared to when he's fully 6-starred and then you're like, okay, I'm going to build him now after the fact. It is still very noticeable. It's still an extra 200 damage. It's fantastic. Triggering a large saber restores rage by 50. So specifically, I didn't mean to back out that far. If we look at his ultimate, it costs 1200. If we fully dust him up, it will scale down to 1000 damage or 1000 rage before he can activate that blade hurl. With that being said, if every 4th attack is what it turns out to be, after those multiple attacks, you're building up an additional 50 every attack rather than his like 1 to 2 every time he's hitting an enemy. You'll start noticing that his ultimate just comes up very frequently. This is also a champion where giving more attack speed to, he's slowing things down more and more and more, you know, like more quickly over and over again, which then means you're getting to that ultimate faster. Attack speed is just a very nice stat on Theowin here. So here in his passives, we have attack speed increased by 25. It is helpful. I wish it was higher. I will say this was on my main account. I was really looking forward to this. I thought it was going to be a bigger impact. It's nice, but it's definitely more noticeable earlier on. The later you get into the game, this is just a nice little bonus. It helps, but I wish it was more. I wish it was like 40 or 50. I really wish it was 50. I think at 50 it would be amazing. Awakening 5. The blade triggered by Blade Hurl, so that's his ultimate, deals damage to a larger area when it stays in place. So, I wanted to show this off as quickly as possible because, again, when we're talking about these champions, we want to talk about, okay, what do they actually look like in content? So, promotion raids. He is absolutely phenomenal, of course, in his marksman, right? All the champions that are in their own areas, they are going to look amazing in their own promotions. And Theowin is no slouch to this at all. So here, my Theowin is getting increased range because I have the Lord Aracha here. But here is his passive. So as he throws out multiple blades, so there's 3. So that's an indicator for us that his next attack is going to be that guaranteed slow. And now we gotta wait. But we can stack his passive and his ultimate together. So here he's going to throw out his passive. And we didn't really get to see the AoE of it just because of Indril. I guess I should have put her back a square.
Take shelter now. Burning hell awaits you, filth.
But so here I'll cast out his ultimate.
You have my blades now.
As you can see, fully awakened, this has an enormous reach to it. And it feels brilliant. This is one of the more fun ultimates. Now, what is a shame is that before you awaken him to +5, his ultimate will be that size. It is very underwhelming when you first play with him. And I was really, really shocked by that as a decision, like as a design decision, is that at Awakening 5, how massive size that is makes Theowin feel phenomenal.
You have my blades now.
But we can stack the 2 blades together, and as you can see, that one does hit everything within range of it for very noticeable damage. For very, very noticeable damage. It feels phenomenal. I didn't actually mean to make that run, but I guess I can use the emblems after all. So Theowin, is he good in the campaign? He's absolutely brilliant in the campaign. So if you get him early and you like him, I personally really liked him. I just had other archers that I got sooner than him that already got resources before I got him. So by the time I got him, I was not using him as heavily as I could have. But he is one of the cheapest champions in the game. He has one of the fastest attack speeds in the game. And then he has a slow built into his kit without taking the hit to his damage. So he has the utility and the damage. He's got a whole kit around him that is fantastic. So in the promotions, he is good in all of these. And the one way I would say he's kind of the weakest. So melee, again, as we get halfway down through the melee, you lose your platforms. So after that point, he's not as fantastic there. But in the melee and in the mage ones, he's technically less usable in those because you get against heavily armored enemies, and piercers struggle against that heavy armor. So with that being said, I wouldn't encourage you to use them in these two areas, in the mages and in the melee. However, you absolutely still can. His slow is still very valuable in both these stages. His cheap cost also makes him pretty valuable to give you more time to decide on something else. Or if you 6-star him, yes, you can kind of bully your way into some of these stages with that cheap cost. Guild Boss. He does okay into Guild Boss. Again, his big mechanic is either the AoE that he does every couple of attacks, and the dragon doesn't really care about that, and then the slowdown effect. Now, if you do have certain faction leaders, there is one that enhances damage based upon slows. So for that reason, he can be very valuable in Guild Boss. However, is he the best for Guild Boss out of the piercers? Not really. Again, if you 6-star him and you 6-star him early, or if you 5-star him, or if he has some of your best equipment, yes, you bring him into Guild Boss until you get something maybe more appropriate for Guild Boss. He will do his job in Guild Boss, but he wouldn't necessarily be amazing. He'd be an easy one to replace sooner than later. It just depends on how much you gear him up or if he's your favorite. Artifact Material Raid, again, he can kind of be a good additional damage source. I don't love him for the Artifact Material Raid, and just like in the promotion raids for melee fighters, as you get further down, you get less and less platforms to play off of. That makes it harder and harder to justify using Theowin over a lot of other specific damage dealers. Maybe somebody more heavily focused on single target damage, or even if you had Theowin facing the opposite direction, the slow isn't necessarily useful enough that it allows your team the tons of free time they would need to kill Salazar. So I kind of feel like, yes, you could use him there. Not the best place for him. Tide is an amazing place for Theowin. Not only does he deal the single target damage, but he also does the AoE damage. When he ults, he's sending out that gigantic disc when he is fully awakened. Again, I started off this video by saying I would not sink Awakening Stones into him. However, because you can fuse extra copies of him, if you love Theowin, or if you like the kit and you like how we're displaying him, then yes, you could spend your first week fusing 5 copies of him. Technically 6, because you would need the base one and then 5 for Awakenings. But as you would get those copies, you could give him all the Awakenings possible, and when that disc is massive, that is absolutely when Theowin is at his best, and it is very noticeable. Just like Wrath, it is a very great design choice because it feels amazing taking him to that Awakening 5. Resource raids, he's absolutely brilliant. What's great about him is that as you are fighting some of the enemies that have a larger...
has gone cold.
As you're fighting enemies that have a larger HP pool, he's fantastic there, as well as for killing off like these little weaklings, right? His AoE will do perfectly fine against game. Hold on. So here we can see he deals plenty of damage to the little weak ones. But on top of that, him hitting everything for this AoE slows things down enough that your single target damage dealers, so in this case Deimos,
You have my blades now.
do plenty of damage. And here we can see, and this is not even the best gear on the account, this is just how I have him currently equipped. It is enough for him to clear out a lot of this content pretty easily. And I want to stress in these videos that I'm making, I could have extra damage dealers out. I am trying to show off Theowin being amazing. The more damage dealers that are out is not going to showcase Theowin being amazing. But again, his AoE here is extremely valuable, especially these enemies who have no armor, so they're just taking a lot of damage. They're like HP sponges. But his passive slowing everything down means that if I had a mage or two here, or any other, you know, piercer that is geared up, they could be taking shots and really thinning out these numbers very quickly. Or your mages that have AoE, let's say characters like Osiren or Zealous that have a small, like they attack and then leave a small AoE on the ground. Theowin causing a slow can keep those enemies trapped in that damage zone for longer, making him feel very amazing. But as you saw, even the enemies that had higher HP, you know, the thicker goblins and then the king, Theowin did not struggle to damage them and, you know, rip them apart. Gear raids. Theowin's actually pretty good in all three of these. I would say Gear Raid 2 is probably his weakest because a lot of these enemies have a lot of heavy armor. However, his ability to also slow them down or to put that AoE giant disc in an area as the enemies are all coming to the same one area, and it would be the same thing for Gear Raid 1. As he's attacking one enemy, when he throws out that giant disc or just his passive in general, it would be hitting everything in that area. Does make him very valuable. In Gear Raid 3, he was absolutely essential for me to push my Gear Raid 3 a little bit further. I did not get a Piercer legendary for a while, and then I didn't get like Maul, who I was really, really hoping for. Theowin was able to slow some enemies down enough that some of my other damage dealers could kill them. And it was because I had Theowin at 5-star for so long. Actually, in this past like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago, I brought him up to 6-star, and then just this past weekend, I was able to awaken him to 5, and was like, okay, this feels good. It feels amazing. It absolutely feels amazing now that he's fully awakened. So that has been something very fun for me to have with him. Faction Trial. So he is part of the Star Piercers. There it is. He feels very, very good in that faction. It's one of those things that specific faction, it is very crucial who you place where. So I would not place him as the boss killer. Now, again, if he has all of your resources or like a lot of your damage and gear on him, by all means, yes, you can put him where the boss is to kill off the boss in that faction trial. I would say, though, he is a lot better at slowing down the other side of things, which is kind of swarming you, if you will. And him doing AoE damage, him slowing things down, that will make him feel a little bit better on that side. Lastly, the Void Rift, and I forgot to talk about this in a previous video, but it's not that big of a deal. Wherever you need a Piercer, or if you need that slowing effect, it's something that makes Theowin very good. I will say, though, there are other champions that can do that same slowing effect. However, him putting out the damage and having a slow makes him a bit more valuable than, like, let's say, Mari. It's a very different skill set. Mari is just that pure slow and debuff, whereas Theowin is more about, oh, I'm going to put out plenty of damage, and I'm going to slow them down. So he feels good pretty much everywhere. In the arena, some of your single target DPS he'll be fine at. Your AoE, he feels amazing in. The flyers, he's absolutely phenomenal in. And now that I've upgraded him to Awakening 5, that giant disc is just going to obliterate any of the flyers and pretty much any of the AoE stuff as well. It's going to make him a lot more usable and, you know, give him higher potential in those. Shortcomings. What shortcomings does our Theowin friend have? So one of the biggest things that I would say is kind of his shortcoming is that a lot of times you're depending on him to be constantly slowing things down. But the reality is if your attack speed is not high enough, so specifically my Theowin does not have a heavy investment on attack speed, not to the point that I want. I want this to be at least like 100 or 150 for my gear. And unfortunately, Theowin, in terms of a hierarchy on my account, he's a little bit on the low side because I have other investments into other champions, or I use certain champions in like every piece of content. He's just not in every content for me personally. I also don't really like elves. So as much as I appreciate how he looks great. His weapon is a really cool idea for the marksman class. I absolutely love him as an idea. I wish that he was like a dark evil elf or something, or maybe a vampire would have made him much more my taste and a lot more appealing to me. That being said, he's still fantastic. He absolutely does his job very well. However, if you're depending on that slow, there are times though where you might be slowing one enemy and another enemy that's either faster or another enemy will just come walking through because the timing of your slow ends, which means I just need more attack speed on my Theowin. I will get there eventually. Just at the moment, I don't have the gear to give him that much attack speed to make him feel stupid amazing. That's kind of the biggest shortcoming for him, is that you depend on him for that slow, and when that slow misses or it's mistimed in any way, shape, or form, it can feel bad compared to a champion like Mari, who is about that consistent slowing. He is definitely I don't want to say a burst slower, but he slows them down, and then they typically have 2 to 3 seconds to walk before they're slowed again. So the timing of his slow can feel a little awkward at times. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Theowin. I hope that is useful to you. I hope that you like him. I hope that for those of you who are like, oh, he looks cool, I'm into elves, I love his weapon, I hope that as you play with him, you really enjoy him. In terms of dust, I would absolutely encourage you that, yes, dust on him is amazing, especially if you need a piercer. I'm sorry, I have like a hair or something on my face and it's driving me nuts. I hope that you feel great as you give him dust. Giving him dust is no problem at all. It feels great. However, when it comes to awakening him, definitely do not use your awakening stones. Definitely just fuse the extra copies of him. It's not that difficult. Those resources are pretty easy to get, and if you feel like they're not easy to get, I hate to say this, I would just sit there and farm either more experience or more gold. Trust me, you will get those resources guaranteed. Glenn is kind of the hardest resource to come by, so if you get copies of Glenn, don't sell him for diamonds, hold on to them so that you can awaken Theowin, because getting him to that 5-star awakening, just like Wrath, was massively game-changing. When you awaken him to 5, he feels like a very different champion at 5-star awakening, and he feels amazing at 5-star awakening. So, thank you very much for watching, but of course, until that next time.